Good night, Madam Chair.
Okay, welcome, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions. It is Tuesday, January 23rd, and we have just finished with the governor's budget address, and we're here with our new capital bill of sorts, our budget adjustment. This is our midterm adjustment in terms of our two-year budget. It's going to be a little different for folks, what we went through last year. But for us who have been here before, we'll help you navigate it. And we do have Sean Brown, who's the Chief of Operations for the Agency Administration, along with Nick Kramer, who's at the budget analysis for the Department of Finance and Management. So welcome, Sean.
Thank you.
And it's all yours. You
Thank
can
you.
introduce the capital budget as you wish.
Thank you. And as Chair indicated, Sean Brown, Chief Operating Officer for the Agency of Administration. I'm here to give you a high-level overview of the governor's proposed capital budget adjustment for the FY 24 and 25 capital bill cycle. At a high level, last year, the governor submitted a capital budget of $203 million. Of that, about approximately 108 was for bond using bonded dollars, and then the rest were using one-time general fund or cash fund appropriations and some other smaller funding sources to reach the $203 million proposal. This year being an adjustment year, our revenues are significantly reduced, just given we're off cycle. And CDAC, the Credit Debt Advisory Affordability Committee, I may have got that backwards in some of those, is recommending we hold steady at our current bonding level in the capital bill of $108 million. And you have a letter from the treasurer, a memo from the treasurer in your packet that kind of outlines that recommendation. And our governor's proposed adjustment honors that recommendation from the treasurer's office. All told, with the bonding level, we have revenue available of about $19 million to support the capital adjustment this year. And so you will see how we allocate that in a little bit. But I did want to just at a high level indicate how we got to that level. And Nick will jump in here if I misspeak a little bit. About 1.3 million is from prior year reallocations from projects that have completed and didn't use all of their funding. Also, we do have a small reduction in one current project in the capital bill of around $50,000 in that total. We also have some savings from some bond issuance costs that we budget for, where we didn't need to spend those dollars to go out for bonding. That's about $1.15 million. Bond premium. So when we went out to bond and investors pay a premium to buy our bonds, we have about $5.2 million available in bond premium this year to contribute to that $19 million. We're also the governor's recommended adjustment proposal proposes a full 4% cash fund transfer for FY25, which would equal just about 10.7 million, just under $10.7 million. Oh, sorry. And then we also were able to generate about $875,000 in interest in the cash fund this year. So when you bring all those funds together, we have about $19 million available for the budget capital budget adjustment.
So this is new.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these moving pieces are new for committee members. So I just want to take this step by step.
Sure.
Okay. So in the reallocation, if you remember, reallocations are those projects that are either been completed or and there's a project balance, or the project may not have gone forward. There were some changes. There's a total, what the administration is proposing, about 1.3 million. We have our repro group of Mary, Chip, and Troy that also do a deeper dive with that, and they work with our joint fiscal office and our legislative council office to work on that.
I believe our financial services unit staff work.
Well, they figure out what they do, and letters go out to folks. So we do a little deeper dive on that. There is a cost when we go out to bond. Every item here, there is a bonding cost. So we did not go out to bond once as anticipated, correct? So there is a.
Recently went in August, but this might be from prior years too, and it's been.
Yeah.
Chair, I can speak more in depth. It's actually a little bit more technical. Until the FY 24 budget, we were paying for bond issuance costs by taking a haircut of every capital appropriation. That was the methodology the state had used for many, many years. Recently, best practice and GASB rules have changed. We moved in FY 24 to directly appropriating for bond issuance costs. There is a specific line in the operating budget every year for that. So there were these residual amounts in a variety of bond issuance, debt service funds that were left over from that haircut era. And since we've moved our methodology moving forward, those are no longer necessary.
But you're saying originally the money is incorporated in our capital budget for the project. So the money that's being reallocated, basically, it's another reallocation.
That's right, Madam Chair.
It's actual capital dollars, though it's part of paying for going out to bond for those projects.
Correct. It would have been prior year capital appropriations that were reallocated towards bond issuance costs that weren't needed.
And that's a total of about 1.5 million.
That is about 1.15.
It's 1.15.
Yeah.
Is the bond cost, is that strictly upfront or is it rolled into the payment?
No, that's up. I think we paid that. I'll defer to Nick, but I believe
The
it's up.
bond issuance cost.
Yeah.
That's the cost, those are comprehensively the cost of paying bond counsel, the underwriters, all. of
Okay.
it,
Yeah,
everything
so it's an
that goes into
upfront cost.
preparation.
Yeah.
Okay, not necessarily the bonding bank then. You answered the question. Thank you.
So then the other part, and this is where it gets really complicated. We get this maybe once every 2 years. When we go out and sell our bonds, sometimes we get a premium payment for the bonds. Sometimes, depending on the interest rates and how we sell it. And this time around, we end up with a bond premium that we received of about 5.2 million. Sometimes it's only 1 or 2, sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 5 or 6. Used to be pretty minimal, and it would stay with the appropriations bill in the general fund. And when we started to pay off our school construction, we were starting to see like 10 million, 12 million coming in to our bond premium. So we shifted that down here to the capital bill. And that was about 7, 8 years ago, we started doing that. So that 5.2 million is money to our bottom line. And then there is the formula for the cash fund of transferring 4% general fund dollars, only general fund. It's not the whole state budget. It's only that part of the budget that is funded with general fund. Doesn't include any federal funds or special funds, but 4% of the general fund through a formula. There's 10.7 million of general fund dollars that's transferred to us. So if we don't get that 10.7 from appropriations, we're 10.7 in the capital bill. And then there was interest on the cash fund of 875,000 that is being put towards our capital bill. Wayne?
The 875 is in the same boat as the rest of the cash though, right? In terms of what?
Not like the 4%, not quite like the 4%.
But appropriations has having their fingers on it.
We don't know about that one. So that's our 19 million. Nick, did you want some?
If I might, Madam Chair, the distinction representative would be that the interest in the fund, per current statute, accrues to the fund and is sitting currently in the cash fund, whereas the transfer, as Chair alluded to, is contingent on, per the current legislative construct, is contingent on an appropriations decision to transfer that.
Transfer. And it says up to 4% in the current. statutory language, and we're proposing the full 4%.
And just for the record to clarify, we're sort of speaking shorthanded, I think, about the transfers and the 4% transfer. It's technically 4% of the prior year general fund appropriations minus the estimated current year debt service.
Service, yeah.
So it's not fully 4%.
Yeah, so when we minus out the debt service payment that we need to make, then we are left with the 10.7 million dollars of a cash fund transfer.
So that's for our 19 million. So that will play in, folks, when we do markup. Okay? So important to keep this in mind. Okay.
So when we look at, that 19, just over $19 million, we look to what, priorities are there that need to be funded. And are there new projects that have popped up that are important and that we should fund in the, in the adjustment year and not in the original capital bill. And so, as we're putting this together, we're talking to our different agencies, BGS is very involved, trying to understand where we are in current projects. And then also, there were some mechanisms that happened last year with the cash fund and legislation that put pressure on the budget, the capital budget adjustment this year. And that's the first thing I will talk about. In the original proposal, there were a list of 10 projects that we proposed to be funded by cash fund. Your committee supported those projects, but allocated that they be funded outside of this current capital bill cycle. But then it was subsequently modified in the budget bill, and then at the end of the session with the housing bill, where the funding that was going to come out of the operating budget to fund those projects was utilized to support the housing plan that was put forth at the end of the session. And so there is no cash fund or general fund appropriations for those approved projects at this time, and they total $10 million. So we're proposing using 10 million of the cash fund transfer this year to fund those projects. So that's that's over 50% of the funds available are to fund projects that were authorized last year but not funded. And we still believe those projects are important and are proposing that they be funded with 10 million of that $19 million. So that takes over a majority of half of the funds available this year to fund those projects that were authorized last year.
So where on the spreadsheet is that laid out? Is that in section 18?
That's the way I have it, yeah. So those would be in the FY25 column of section B. The $10 million that we authorized in Act 69 last year highlighted. New adjustments to the cash fund.
So just trying to.
I can review those projects.
That's
committee.
Yeah, does that
Yeah.
start with your reuse planning?
Yes,
contingency,
250, yep, and then they run down through the 111 State Street stack area renovation HVAC for 200,000.
But it doesn't include those that are highlighted in yellow. It doesn't include those, or does it?
Barry McFarland re-roof, Madam Chair, has been here proposing an increase.
Yeah,
Just to orient the committee to the spreadsheet, so three columns on the left represent Act 69 as passed. The middle column is the governor's recommend. Any changes should be highlighted in yellow, and the final set of three columns to the right. Governor record Act 69. So you can see that Barry McFarland re-roof were proposing 1 million in cash fund this year. And then further down below, there's an addition for USC statewide correctional facility HVAC. That's also new this year, highlighting the yellow. The FY25 cash fund projects should total $10 million in those. You can also see them to the left, in the Act 69 as passed. Those are the $10 million projects that were authorized in Act 69, for which no funding was
So of the 19 million that you're saying you found money to go towards our bottom line, 10 million of that is for what we passed in Act 69 in the FY 25. Appropriations cannot appropriate for 2 years because they don't do a 2-year budget. They appropriated everything in FY 24 that was for the cash fund. In FY 25, we had intent language that our intent was to use cash for these projects that are listed in section 18 in the FY 25 column as passed by Act 69. So what they're proposing is this money is no longer available in cash because it was swept out for the housing situation. So that 10 million that we put aside for cash in FY 25 is no longer there. So they're saying of the 19 million that they found, 10 million of that 19 will go to these projects. Is that clear to folks?
And then we have a series of other ongoing projects that are underway and are experiencing cost increases, either due to labor and material increases, or as those projects move forward, they determine that there was more damage to some of that than they anticipated, and so the costs are going to be greater. And there are 4 projects that fall into that category, and those total about $3.15 million of spending. We have a current project at the Department of Labor to improve restroom ADA accessibility upgrades, some facility-wide electrical upgrades. They're looking at a need of about $1.54 million to complete that work of that renovation at the Department of Labor building just across the way. Also, the PGS anticipates needing additional funding to complete the roof replacement at the Northwest State Correctional Facility that was authorized. Due to increased labor and material costs, it's looking $400,000 is needed to complete those renovations. Also, BGS is moving forward on an authorized project at the Barry McFarland building, re-roofing and doing some the brick facade replacement. As they were moving forward and starting to work on that building, they realized as they were starting to take it apart that there was much more substantial damage than they anticipated that they were encountering, and they are anticipating needing $1 million more to complete that project for the increased damages that they've discovered in that building. And BGS, the commissioner is here, and Kate Eberly is here as well, and then they'll be available to have their teams come in and testify in more detail about what they've discovered in these projects and why they're experiencing these cost increases, or if we saw more damage than we anticipated. Also, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development and a couple of historical sites needs $200,000 more due to some cost increases on ongoing projects at the Justin Morrill House and the President Coolidge home site as well for $200,000. And so that's about $3.15 million of the $19 million that we're proposing be spent on to cover increased cost pressures on existing projects.
What, 1.5 or?
Yeah, about 3.15.
That's Department of Labor, St. Albans Correctional Facility roof, McFarland House roof, and other construction on the historical sites. And some of that you have listed, at least one of those, which is the McFarland,
If I may, Madam Chair,
section 18.
seeing a lot of furrowed brows during that. It might be helpful to just point out exactly where those are in the spreadsheet.
Yes.
We jumped
Yeah.
around some.
We did, John.
Section, we did, and I apologize.
John mentioning was the
Department of Labor.
Department of Labor, so that's showing up as a new section, section 15A.
Spreadsheets, so
And this is see.
And it's an existing project from a prior capital bill, but because it wasn't from the current capital bill, there was not.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I had to add it as a new section, even though it is a continuation of the. Then I think the second item was the courthouse. Correct, yeah, no, the Northwest State Correctional Facility roof replacement, that's in section 2. The bonded dollar appropriations, that's on the first page of the spreadsheet. $400,000 appropriation in FY 25 that was not in access. Then I think next mentioned was the Barry McFarland building. That's a cash fund appropriation. I highlighted that earlier. That's on the final page of the spreadsheet. Second from the top, $1 million appropriated in FY 25, not in Act 69. And then finally, the increase for Agency of Commerce and Community Development, that is in section 4, very top line, major maintenance, you'll see, then we'll see there's an increase from 500,000 in Act 25 per Act 69. Currently, we're proposing to increase that to 7.
Where was the one on the last page?
On the last page representing the Barry McFarland building was the second from the top of section 18, $1 million. Hard to keep track, I know, if you know, different enough to.
So on that McFarland one, you do have that in section 18. Which. You know, I'm telling you, the way it was stapled is problem.
We had trouble with our printer.
Yeah, because we're looking at it like this. So the McFarland. We paid we put 1.7 million out of cash in FY 24. So, and we did not put anything in FY 25. So when you started work on it, you found some issues. So it's $1 million that you're proposing in FY 25. Are you and I know you're proposing that out of the remaining 9 million on the bottom line. The 19 million that we have, that you found with reallocations and the transfer from the general fund.
Yes.
10 million of that 19 is going towards those other projects.
Which this is included in the base.
Right.
Yep.
So are you including McFarland at that 1 million? Are you including that in cash?
Yes, that's correct. So there's after the $10 million backfilling of the $10 million worth of cash fund projects. There's 1.5 roughly left over in cash based on the cash fund transfer plus interest. The cash fund transfer plus interest total $11.5 million. We're using 10 of that to backfill projects. There's 1.5 million left over, 1 million we're proposing for Barry McFarland, and the remainder, I think it's 562,000 or something, is on at the bottom of section 18, proposing that go to EOC to back updates,
Okay.
combined with a bonded dollar appropriation elsewhere that also supports that.
Did people follow that? So in cash, what we're really looking at is 11.562. The cash. Mary.
Are the books all the same because the spreadsheets in the book, which are smaller, I only have 1 page and others have more.
Well, because we expanded it, it did print on more sheets of paper. We'll take a look at your book to see if some pages are missing, but okay. I think it does fit on one.
You have 2 sheets, Mary.
So somehow one got left off. We'll bring you over some new sheets. Yeah.
So in essence, just trying to think of this a little bit different. So in essence, I don't like to do math in public. So in essence, what you're saying of our capital bill this year, you're saying 11.5 million is paid with cash. And we have 7.5 million in bonded capacity.
Correct.
In terms of reallocations and
On premium and
on premium.
other, yeah.
So the bonded piece on top of the I don't know how to say this for the committee, but we have bonding capacity of 54 million per year for FY 24 and FY 25 for 108 million total. So between the bond premium and the reallocations and the bond cost savings, we have an additional 7.5 million for that. The other piece of everything that's moving around, the administration is saying 11.5 million of the projects will be paid for by cash. That's what they're saying. Okay.
And then we have several other proposed projects that we're funding in the capital bill adjustment. One is the Department of Justice conducted an audit of our correctional facilities for ADA compliance, and we had some findings. We entered into a settlement agreement with the Department of Justice to make upgrades to our facilities to come into compliance, and BGS, working with corrections, anticipates that we need $822,000 to complete those upgrades. And so we're proposing, that we fund those in the capital adjustment, given it's a binding agreement we have with the Department of Justice to make these. And it is the right thing to do to make our facilities ADA compliant. And so that's $822,000. And then last year, there was some money appropriated and authorized regarding HVAC in correctional facilities. And in your booklet is a copy of the BGS study that was submitted this fall regarding what it would cost to bring our other all of our correctional facilities up to HVAC standards and provide air conditioning in those facilities. It's a substantial cost, which we wouldn't be able to absorb in this capital adjustment cycle just because of the substantial cost. However, we are proposing to move forward with what the Department of Corrections prioritized for the first facilities they would like to move forward on. So we are proposing moving forward with the correctional facility in Springfield. Just given the population of who it serves, it's vitally important that's the first priority of the Department of Corrections is the Springfield facility. And then the second priority is the Northeast facility up in St. Johnsbury. So we are that's a little over almost $4.5 million between those two facilities to provide that work. And so when you add up those dollars that how we've talked about proposed, we come up to that approximately $19 million for these projects. We also had a proposal late in the development of the capital bill regarding some urgency with the military wanting to transfer and sell the Waterbury Armory to the state. And they needed to do that under current Vermont law at fair market value. which based on a recent appraisal is 890,000. And so we sharpened our pencils and went back through, kind of did the deep dive that your repo committee does to see if we could find additional capacity someplace to fund that purchase. We were able to identify some reallocations, some additional ones. In meeting with the chairs of the institutions committee, there was some just concern about the process and the timeline. No, I would just say it was important. There was important dialogue, and we understood, and we proposed another way that's now being funded through the budget adjustment allocation so that they can move forward, because it's a very time sensitive transfer for them. They need to purchase additional property up in St. Albans so that they can have that in place to pursue a congressional earmark in Washington for the funds to build their new, to fulfill their vision of these new readiness centers that they're building. And so given we didn't need those dollars and it was late in this process, we have left that $890,000 on the bottom line for the committee to determine how those funds would be spent.
And Madam Chair, for the record, my name is Jennifer Fitch, BGS Commissioner, and I know repo is always a big topic in this committee. So I want to be fully transparent and tell you that it's when they pull the information from Vision, right? So what I'm getting at is projects should constantly be closed out through the capital plan. So anytime they sweep the information through Vision, it's in that time frame, right? So we swept it in September, and we gave you the reallocations as of September. Knowing that this was a high need and priority, we went back and we did another sweep in December, and more projects have been closed out by then. And that's why those additional reallocations came to bear. So I just want to be very open and transparent because I know this can be a sensitive topic for this committee.
So for the repro group, what you're essentially saying that there may not be as much that we find for reallocations because you've done an additional sweep.
That's right. That's correct, Madam Chair.
Correct.
We'll look hard.
Yeah, but there may be additional projects that have closed out since
By the time we do the next, whenever we do the next piece.
work happens at your committee level. So that $890,000 is available for the committee's consideration and determination where those be best spent.
And I want to thank you too for the HVAC systems. Because we, as a committee, started taking this on, I think it was in 22. It was 22, 21, 22. We put in some initial money to start looking at our correctional facilities for providing HVAC systems. So I want to thank the administration for putting in a line item for this and really looking at substantial dollars to start the process, because we know it's expensive for all the facilities. I know we had Chittenden and Rutland. Those two are
The only two, Madam Chair.
that are air conditioned.
There's one that is a substantial cost that will take a better part of a capital bill cycle to
And it's St. Albans.
St. Albans, I believe, yeah.
Part of a bigger discussion.
You're doing some of that with the renovation though, right? In the new space?
Short term and the long term, so your memory is correct, and wherever we can make short-term gains that we can then add into the long-term gain, and that makes a lot of sense, so we will be looking at that as well.
But these two that you're proposing, the two facilities that you're proposing, that's long-term.
That's long-term.
That's long-term, yes, that would, yes. And those are the facilities we can have, BGS obviously would speak more to it and the study and how they came up with the cost for those projects. But corrections would be happy to come in and also why they identified those as their first two priority facilities. But Springfield was their number one and the St. Johnsbury was their number two priority.
So again, I want to thank you for putting this in as a line item, because it has been an interest in this committee from the get-go, and it wasn't in the governor's budget. And that's why during calendar year of 21 or 22 or 23, so this is really the first time it's shown up as a request within the governor's budget. So I want to thank you for that.
It's a priority for the administration as well, try to move the ball down the field in that area. We also in your booklet has some proposed bill language for the capital adjustment bill, and I just kind of wanted to highlight a couple key components of our proposed bill language for the committee. One is we are proposing to, last year, the capital fund appropriations for the cash fund were moved out of the capital bill and into the big bill. We are proposing that those appropriations for this capital bill cycle be moved back into the capital bill. So you would see language making those transfers in that bill language. We also have a couple stat language we're looking for committee support and approval. One is regarding the proceeds from the sale of 108 Cherry Street, which is currently for sale. And Commissioner Fitch could update the committee at some point on that process and where that process is at. We do still have an internal debt to our property management account in terms of the purchase of that property and the building of that property. Back in the early 90s, I believe it's about a $6 million deficit is owed to that account for that property. And so from those proceeds, we would like to recapture and pay the state ourselves back essentially and bring that special fund out of deficit, to make from the prior purchase and creation of that property.
So the property management fund, I know that the appropriations bill has put money in there, because I was in a hole by about 10, 12 million for a while. And we put money, the appropriations bill put money in it. So we saying there's still a $6 million hole there?
So, Madam Chair, there was $20 million
Is that 20?
in that account, and the 10 million was just to wipe off the unfunded liabilities. That means we didn't have a payment mechanism. That was what was built over time. They gave spending authority for property management for the staff for many, many years, and that built up to the 10 million, but there was never a revenue source for it. The other side of the ledger is the 10 million that we continue to owe, combined with Asa Bloomer and 108 Cherry. 108 Cherry is around 6, Asa Bloomer is around 4, and we'll come in and we'll talk all about what it is and why it's there. But the way it works is that debt gets paid off by the tenants in the building when they pay their fee for space. And because we're selling the building and we won't have anyone in it, there will be no more revenue source to pay down that debt. And so this is to pay off, the hope is that we pay off the debt, because if we don't pay it off, we will again have unfunded liability that doesn't have a revenue source to pay it off.
So for the committee, whenever we have a sale of property, like the Williston Police Barracks, like 108 Cherry, anytime we sell any property that's under BGS's control, the proceeds of the sale go to the capital. So you need language if we're going to do this. We need language to move it to pay off the property management fund and not go to the bottom line of the capital. So the balance of that sale minus, if we do this, the balance of that sale minus the 6 million, if there's more, would go to the capital. If there's more.
We did this, Madam Chair, with 20 Holton Street.
Oh, yes, we did. We did it to go towards the lease payments.
Did not know that part.
No,
We did
that's
go back
where
and
it
look at
went.
the language.
That's where it went when we sold 20 Houghton.
In this case, we want to pay down the deficit.
And then we are also proposing language that modifies how the Department of Environmental Conservation works with the Department of Forest Parks regarding projects, capital projects. I think back in the 90s, there was some statutory provisions created that create some oversight for DEC over Forest Parks and Recreation, also looping in buildings and general services. They're proposing to streamline that language and then also remove BGS formally from that role. They do consult with BGS now. BGS is supportive of this, and DEC and Forest Parks are supportive of this language, and ANR and DEC and Forest Parks would be happy to come in and testify in more detail regarding why they're moving forward and what the impact would be. It's more aligning, the language is aligning with current practice as it is now in many ways.
So they still have their own engineering staff.
Yes, yes, that do that work, yes. Mhm. And they still would, with their staff with this. It just kind of streamlines it to how the current practice is. Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to touch on is what's not in the capital adjustment bill, just because of the funding limitations. You know, as we've talked about last session in this committee, and we set aside money in the current capital bill to go towards the future construction of a woman's correctional and transition facility. We were hoping that we would have funds available this year to set further funds aside, just given the construct and the funding available. We felt like we couldn't do that this year. So that's just one of those big capital projects that's on the horizon that will continue to be a conversation, particularly in the next capital bill cycle. As we move forward, we're hoping to put more aside because the price tag for that facility will be quite large. The other big project cost project on the horizon on the Battle of Bennington Monument is deteriorating just due to how it was constructed and its age. Moisture is really taking its toll on that facility, and it's falling, it's starting to fall apart from the inside and outside and becoming a danger to people. In the current capital bill last year, the governor proposed, and it was supported in the final bill, fencing to go around to protect visiting that facility. We've been working very closely with ACCD on, can we find other alternate sources of funding to help support that with, either federal partner, through grants or an appropriation. And it's just not something that we're able to secure. And so and it's a cost that is quite large. And so I think we just, next year we will have probably a lot more conversation regarding the Battle of Bennington Monument and what can we do within the capital bill to support some of the work that needs to stabilize that monument.
So let me get this straight. The fencing is going up or it's not?
It is. The fencing is going up, and because of the cost and the projections of the cost and the extent of the damage is growing. We're working with BGS to make sure the fencing around there meets the need, it's aesthetically pleasing. Guests will be able to still get close to it, up to the fencing to view it once it's closed and the fencing's around, but they'll still be able to access other parts of the monument facility, like the gift shop and the other areas.
It's not the monument.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest visit centers in the state. So I hope we can find the money to.
I know where you can get some razor wire.
The fencing, nice Windsor comment. The fencing, we'll talk about that. Sure. So just so you know, Representative Morrissey, so the fencing is going up. And it's also the first step because we would need it anyway to be able to put staging around the facility,
No,
right?
right.
So it really is the first step to continuing our street building.
When I hear further discussions, then
Can you share what the estimated cost might be, or is that unknown?
I mean, we have some high level estimates that are pretty significant. I'll just say we're in the tens of millions of dollars.
Connor, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think I was just confused on the prison. Are we saying we're actually sort of delaying the timeline for construction?
No,
We're just allocating the money?
No, not at all. It was more of we've been trying to plan ahead and set money aside as we can, knowing that a facility that could exceed $80 million could easily consume a full capital bill almost in itself, and with other ongoing commitments in it, a couple capital bill cycles. And so we've been wanting to start setting money aside. So as decisions are made on, the size and whatnot, and we get a better sense of the cost that it's going to incur to build that facility, that we have some money set aside so we can move forward when all of those decisions have been made. Because it is a substantial cost, and we just want to be prudent and start putting money aside now when we can to help cover.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
So far, we have 3 million that from previous capital bills, FY 23 and FY 24. And we put in 13 million in FY 25.
Yes. Yes.
So the next step is really working with HOK and BGS and DOC, particularly DOC and BGS, about the layout of the facility. Looking at the reentry program, how that's laid out and what's needed for programming. But also you need a site. So you gotta sort of make some movements here on getting this.
And, you know, and again, DOC and BGS can come in and kind of update the committee on the status of that work in terms of locating an appropriate site. You know, I know that work is ongoing. You know, they're happy to come in and provide updates to the committee on where that process is at. And then the other, I think you've already heard testimony a little in this area. It came to us very late in the capital bill cycle. Almost, we were almost complete in our decision making when the Windsor County State's Attorney is requesting, you know, as renovations happen at the Windsor County Courthouse in White River, that they would like it to be, you know, expanded so that they could be in the courthouse. And the early estimates are that's like a $6 million price tag. And just given it came in very late and we have very limited funds, that's just not included here. And, you know, that will be for the committee's discussion. I know you've already had some testimony on that and we'll have some further deliberations, but I did want to just point out for the committee that that's currently not in the capital budget adjustment bill proposal from the governor. I think at a high level, that is the capital, the high level, the capital bill. Obviously, all of our departments that have proposals here or implicated in this are be available to come in, and obviously buildings and general services are here regularly and will be able to provide support. And also Nick and myself will be here as well to help provide support to the committee as you move forward in your preparations and consideration.
Thank you.
I'd like to.
Yeah, Nick.
Yep.
I'm pointing at the committee members to a couple things that are in the book that to touch on.
Oh, yeah, there is one more thing. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
One, right after, I believe, the language, there's a short page that's the report from the Clean Water Board that's in response to this language that's in Act 69 currently regarding municipal, well, it was originally municipal pollution control grants. It's a portion of the clean water capital bill placeholder that last year was at 10 million and that reduced to 6 million. And the Senate Institutions Committee requested a report back from the Clean Water Board of funding. So there's some language to that effect briefly in there. They're proposing, by the way, to backfill those $4 million that were originally capital bill funded with clean water surplus, one-time available clean water fund surplus, which has accumulated over the last couple of years because of significant revenue upgrades. That's certainly a time-limited thing, not
One-time revenue.
One-time revenue, not expected to continue, but that's how they've addressed that. And then there's a couple pages immediately following that, just recognizing that the cash fund has been a topic of lots of discussion over the last couple of sessions. There are moving pieces to it. There are additional moving pieces that were introduced by this body last year. There are several pages which are our best attempt to demystify some of that, clarify the administration's position. Some of it may be familiar verbiage from last year. Some of it may be new perspective. I won't go into any level of opinion now. Certainly, we'd be happy to come back and try to work out that. But that text is meant to provide some additional color to the committee. And then immediately following that, given we are proposing movement of cash fund appropriations from the big bill back into the capital bill, there's again justification for that provided in the text. There's a spreadsheet, 2 pages of spreadsheet after that. Cash fund crosswalk is the tab. That's just meant to provide kind of an easy reference for anybody. I remember I was sitting in the room a couple of weeks ago and fiscal office was presenting the multiple cash fund sub accounts and which appropriation happened here, which appropriation happened there. That spreadsheet is intended to be as best as we can, an easy to follow guide of here's what happened in Act 69, here's what happened in Act 78, here's what we're proposing moving forward. We can't have this in more detail, but later on that, but just wanted to flag for the committee that that's there. Hopefully as a helpful reference.
So for the committee, when we passed our capital bill and became law signed by the governor, the act number is Act 69. When the governor signed the general fund budget, that became Act 78. Okay, so on this spreadsheet at the very back,
I don't believe the governor signed the budget.
well, after
Yes.
the veto override, after it became law,
Yes.
it was Act 78. So the last spreadsheet, Act 69 is on the front page. That's our bill. Act 78 is the general fund. Yeah. So we're gonna spend a lot of time on the cash fund,
Yeah, it's a level of complexity there.
very much so. And we'll depend on our staff to help us. So with that said, would like to offer an opportunity for our staff, either legislative council or joint fiscal office, if you have any questions or thoughts while the administration is here. If you have any questions of the administration, you're more than welcome to ask.
American Scott Moore, Joint Fiscal. I did have a chance to chat with Nick earlier. He's going to make sure I have a copy of these. So as I've been going, I've been checking the math to make sure the math adds up. But so far, so good. But perhaps you had already sent something to me about the cash fund, so I'll do reading around back up on that to look at the specifics.
Certainly. I can follow up.
Okay, thank you.
So can I ask for something stupid? On our spreadsheet, normally you can just flip it up.
No, this is not.
Yeah, we had a problem with our printer today, and so we'll print new copies for the
It's
committee
usually
that
on this side,
appropriately.
and then it goes on this side, and then when you.
Tell you how many people it took just to provide what it did.
It's something minor, but it makes.
No, it does, and that's why we wanted to provide it. So,
And
because it,
so you'll also give.
yeah, yes, we'll make sure, yeah, I don't know what happened to your pages, so. But absolutely,
And
we'll
I
be back
want the
tomorrow.
monument
Appointment
fixed,
here.
so
Yeah.
get that word out there.
What's that?
I want the monument fixed.
Yes.
I'm right here, Representative. We're taking care of it. I promise that.
I tell you, it will be as bad as when they were going to remove the deer from the deer park at the Veterans Home. It was like World War III.
Can't get New York to chip in after all the battles there.
I hear you. We can always take it down. It's all good.
Anything else? We're done a little early today. That's anyway, because we weren't sure what was gonna happen on the floor today in the afternoon. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll be back for that.
Well, I haven't been to vacation for like. So,
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what else we can work on here, but we may have an early afternoon. I don't know.
that'd be sweet.
What that's
Got some slalom turns and bolting.
Do folks have any questions about the capital budget? Connor?
So like, are we just so I'm clear, it feels like 10 million of this is only real when appropriations says it's real, right? So I guess I'm wondering, like, at what point in the process will they say, that looks awfully good, you know, we'll be taking that? Because I think that can make our job like either a lot easier or harder, you know?
I think it's gonna be very similar to last year. We're not gonna really know until the appropriations starts. They're on March, so it's probably not gonna be until March.
So we'll sort of proceed
We're
like,
gonna-
assuming we have it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, we're gonna proceed taking testimony from BGS, taking testimony from, some of these other moving pieces. I think also a lot of it will be on some updates in terms of the bigger projects, because maybe those projects aren't as far along. Maybe we can move money in there. you know, in some ways it's gonna be easier, in some ways it's gonna be more difficult, because we're gonna be really working with an unknown. And it all depends what approach is doing. I can't answer that at this point. We've got to wait and see, but it doesn't mean we don't have a voice with approach either. For that. So I think it's going to be imperative that we look at current projects that aren't even being, you know, the administration is really not touching some of these other projects or maybe big ticket items. And maybe they're not as far along. And we could find some money in the FY 25 allocation.
Oh, my shoulder. I ordered.
We'll have to do some digging. Okay, anything else? So we'll start, Commissioner, we're gonna have, I'm just looking at my schedule, the schedule here too. If we're gonna be working on some House bills that came over that are in our committee that we want to get out before markup. We need to spend some time working on that, but also we have some pockets of time that we could start testimony with you. Which might be around 11 o'clock on Thursday. What time do we finish our joint meeting? 10:30, right? On Thursday?
And then the old First Church people are coming in at 11.
That's right. Well,
We do have BGS scheduled on
On
Friday
Friday.
after the floor.
after the floor. Okay,
I try to make myself available to the committee whenever possible, so. We need to shuffle some things around, that's okay.
yeah, we're just trying to bring in some items here. Bills on the wall, because that's subject to crossover. And the crossover is sooner for those bills than the capital bill. So that's what we're just trying to balance here. So we'll be in touch.
Okay.
And we know a little more, but Friday after the floor, definitely, providing the floor doesn't go long. Hate to ask this, but would people be willing to do Friday at 8:30?
8:30.
You be available for 8:30 on Friday?
Was there testimony somewhere else? I feel like you mentioned something about, you know, okay, then we're good.
We'll figure out what sections or what we're doing. Okay. Okay. And then we can figure that out. Anything else before we go off of YouTube here?